that we also may be like all the nations, and that our King may judge us and go out before us to fight our battles. Well, they got a king, all right, just as we Americans have embraced one of our own, although we call ours a president. The Israelites, as the prophet Samuel had warned, were no better off for having a king. However, King Saul only led them from one slaughter to another. Likewise, our rulers have led us from one unnecessary slaughter to the next. And to make matters worse, they have exploited each such occasion to fasten their chains around us more tightly. Like the ancient Israelites, we Americans shall never have real, lasting peace so long as we give our allegiance to a king. That is, in our case, to the whole conglomeration of institutionalized exploiters and murderers we know as the state. Thank you very much. We have time for some questions. Yes, ma'am.
First, is this on? Is this on? Okay. First, Mr. Higgs, I want to thank you for taking this discussion, I will say, to a more philosophical level this morning. I have been in agreement with many of the things I've heard this morning, but I was discouraged to see so much finger pointing, as in the case of using the expression Bush administration rather than just government in general. I was saddened by the expression earlier of don't bother with the World War II memorial, because I think that it ignores the American spirit. You are right, absolutely correct as you started saying that war is ugly, but it is really a product of the state. I think more so than what I would like to say are Americans in general, because people do not like war. Government likes war. So going back to my appreciation of your taking this to a philosophical level that you have, I would like to know what you feel that we as libertarian-minded people, we as liberty-loving people can do about the situation. The two words that come to me is education, not manipulation, but perhaps you can expound on that more. Thank you.
I appreciate your question. I receive it whenever I give a talk, and I never have a proper answer. I'm an analyst. I'm not a prophet, and I certainly don't pretend to have the answer to how we get out of this predicament. It was a long time in developing, complex in its development, and it is now so deeply embedded that I cannot see any simple or easy way to get out of it. I think, however, each one of us can do something. Each one of us controls ourselves. I think the first thing we have to do is recognize the state for what it is. If we keep cutting slack to people who live by crime and fail to call that crime what it is, then we're simply deluding ourselves, and we'll never come to a realization of how to escape from our plight. So when you say education, yes, of course, people's eyes must be open to the realities in which they find themselves, because it's the people's support and acquiescence that allows the criminal gangs to do what they do. If we en masse simply said no one day, the whole apparatus would collapse. They need us. We are the host for their predation. They cannot live without our cooperation. But to say that solves nothing, because I have no way to coordinate 300 million people to stand up tomorrow morning and say no, and I'm sure that at least 99% of them would find it a preposterous idea, even if they were presented with it. So we have to somehow find a way to open people's eyes to the reality in which they find themselves. It's unfortunate that the American people are, to a very high degree, a violent, irrational, vicious people. And I don't feel good saying that, but all you have to do is get out and listen to the people around you. This is not going to change easily, but I think there are a number of ways to demonstrate to people that war is not in their long-term interest, that it is in the interest of a small minority of exploiters who live at the expense of everyone else. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Carl Bennion. I'm from the New York City area. It seems that the fundamental systemic enabling factor of perpetual warfare is the central banking system, the fractional reserve system. And what are the prospects of changing that? Does that change first? Does that change later? There could be political change, ideological change. But I've been reading a lot of Mises Institute material, and certainly the central banking system seems to be a fundamental enabling factor.
Well, certainly, since the Federal Reserve was created, it has been an integral part of the machinery by which government finances its war-making. I don't happen to agree, however, that if we got rid of the Fed tonight, that everything would be hunky-dory tomorrow. Government has alternative ways to finance its spending. It used those ways when there was no Fed earlier in our history, and it could revert to them again. Just as government printed up treasury notes, so-called greenbacks, during the Civil War, it could print up greenbacks again. It could create deposits and pass them around in any number of forms. So one can recognize the Fed as a vicious institution, but need not conclude that destruction of the Fed would somehow bring the whole house down on the government and its war-making. I don't think it would.